Hours after it was signed, it was already under strain. Can a lasting ceasefire between Syria's Kurdish-led fighters and the government hold? In a surprise collapse, the SDF has lost its decade-long grip on the northeast. We'll analyse the how, the why and the what next here on Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nusafora. It's the biggest shift in Syria's complex power dynamics since the fall of President Bashar al-Assad. In just a matter of days, the Kurdish-led US-allied Syrian Democratic Forces lost control of the vast majority of its territory in the northeast. To stop the bloodshed, the SDF agreed on the weekend to a ceasefire that would see its forces integrated into the national military. The US Special Envoy Tom Barak was hailing it as a pivotal inflection point, and Turkey's president called it a valuable achievement for lasting peace.
The era of terrorism in our region is completely over. The requirements of the ceasefire and full integration of the agreement must be implemented swiftly. No one should make the same mistake again.
The next day, the clashes resumed. Maybe the writing was always on the wall. The ceasefire deal was signed without both sides present, and a follow-up meeting reportedly ended badly. The security implications for a failed ceasefire are already evident. ISIS fighters held in the region's prisons have escaped. Both sides are blaming each other for the security lapse and ceasefire violations. On this episode, we'll ask, will the fragile ceasefire hold? What's behind the SDF's spectacular collapse? And what are the broader regional ramifications? Joining us for the discussion is Bassem Barabandi, former Syrian diplomat and consultant with the Centre for Global Policy. Ömer Özkızılcık is a senior non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. And rounding out our panel, coming to us from northeastern Syria, is Vladimir van Winkelberg, a journalist, writer and author of The Kurds of Northern Syria, Governance, Diversity and Conflicts. Gentlemen, welcome to Counterpoints and thanks for being with us. Well, we saw an initial agreement between Kurdish forces and the new Syrian government signed back in March of last year, but that very quickly seemed to have lost momentum. Now, 10 months later, another ceasefire deal between the two sides has been reached, but just as quickly, pockets of fighting have sparked up again. It doesn't seem as if any of the underlying issues have been addressed between that last attempted agreement and now. But the difference is, this time around, that the SDF have lost its grip on power in the northeast. So, Bassem, let's start with you. Will this attempt at this fragile ceasefire, will it hold?
Yeah, my friend, thank you for having me and other friends. Actually, I'm former Syrian diplomat and now an ambassador. I get the title of ambassador from Syrian Foreign Ministry. Based on what you are saying, look, there's a lot of development has happened since yesterday till today. There's a new deal, there's a new agreement between Syrian government and SDF. And SDF, they approve it today. They just make another statement that they have accepted. So I hope that tomorrow will be better for Syrian and for the Kurds. I think the opportunity or potential that this deal will be implemented 100% is 90%. US government, Turkish government, Saudis, GCC, EU, all are supporting that effort to reconcile between SDF as military militia and the Syrian government. Syrian government took all the steps to secure all the rights for the Kurds. There's difference between SDF and the Kurds. We don't have problem with the Kurds. Non-Syrian has a problem with the Kurds whatsoever. And the government just recently announced new decrees that bring back or give back all their civil rights for the Kurds that Assad regime and the Ba'ath before them, they took it out. It's not our mistake. It's historical mistake, and now it has been corrected. We back to the SDF issues. I think it has been solved. We hope it will be solved, as they said in their statement today, 1 hour ago. And Syrians are happy. Tomorrow will be much better for all Syrians.
All right. Vladimir, you are in northeastern Syria and you have worked extensively with the community there. Has it been solved? Has this issue between these two very rivals for a very long part of history, has this been resolved?
Well, as Mr. Barani mentioned, that they made an agreement, but Damascus said that they will not enter Hasaka and Kamishli temporarily until an agreement is reached. So we have to still see if there will be an agreement, because we saw many times that there was talks between the SDF and the Syrian government, and then the talks broke again. And here on the ground, they are still afraid that these talks will break down again and there will be fighting. So we still have, and if the things will cool down and if there could be found a solution in which both sides to somehow can make concessions and see if they can contain the situation and that it not leads to more violence between the local population.
Omer, what do you make of this coming from a Turkish perspective? Do you have faith that the Kurdish-led forces will agree to the current iteration of this ceasefire deal?
I mean, from a Turkish perspective especially, there was always, since a year actually, always hope that the YPG-dominated SDF will agree and implement the deals with Damascus. And the hope was quite big as Turkey was progressing its own process with the PKK to disarm and disband itself. So the hope was in Turkey, the PKK will disarm. In Syria, the PKK Syrian branch will be integrated into the Syrian state. And there was quite a big hope that a new era can be opened also in Turkish domestic politics. But unfortunately, one after the other, the YPG has failed us, and the YPG has not implemented the deal. And the problematic point is the agreement that was now recently signed is actually the same agreement that was offered by Ankara and Damascus a year ago. So we lost a year, we had the escalation of violence, and now they have agreed to the same deal that was proposed a year ago. But when this deal was agreed initially, we have seen that on the ground, the YPG has not implemented this deal. And now the question is, will they implement it? Because there's something that I need to underline. We used to say the YPG dominated SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, because there were Arab elements who are not affiliated to the PKK or the YPG. But as of now, all of the Arab components left the SDF, and we see that the YPG has basically lost almost all Arab areas, except for Hasaka city, Kamishli city, and the village in between. So as of now, the SDF, the former SDF, the YPG, has to face a decision. Either they will implement the deal and protect the Kurdish areas from violence and military solutions, or they will continue their route of military escalation. Because what we have seen is inside the YPG, there are two different camps. One camp led by Mazlum Abdi, who is more open to agreements and who is signing these agreements, and then another camp who is torpedoing these agreements again and again and again on the ground.
Ambassador Barabandi, I'm going to come to you in a moment, but first, Vladimir, let me come back to you just for response to what Omer has been saying there. He's saying that there's a whole year has been lost, laying blame squarely on the Kurdish side, that they didn't implement their end of the deal, and that now, you know, there is a very stark choice ahead of them. What do you make of that assessment?
Well, I mean, the previous agreement was a bit vague. That was one of the reasons there were so many disagreements. Another point is that the agreement was like 8 points, and one of them also included some form of constitutional recognition of Kurds. And you saw that the Syrian president recently declared such a decree So this came a bit late. This has been 1 year until they came with such a decree. So I think there's many disagreements between both sides, but it's not just square to be blamed on the SDF side, because also Damascus, there were maybe 8 points of this thing that were not implemented. So I think that was one of the biggest issues. That I think also one of the issues is that the agreement was just understood as a military integration agreement, but it's actually more complicated. It's about return of IDPs and refugees, and about confronting hate speech, about combating Assad remnants, fighting ISIS, and especially constitutional agreement, some form of constitutional guarantees for Kurdish rights, which the Syrian president recently has announced. Although, of course, the Kurdish majority of this Kurdish political party, so I'm not talking just about the SDF, they prefer some form of autonomy. They are hoping with this agreement that they could still have some form of a special status for instance, Kobani and for parts of Hasaka. But of course, Syria says it's one Syria and one united Syria, so I'm not sure if they're gonna agree with that. But the previous agreement that was announced a few days ago, after which the fighting broke down again, it was also mentioning some form of a special status. So there's a hope that there could be some form of a demilitarized zone in, for instance, Kobani and also in Hasaka, and that locals will join the internal security forces, and that peace will be basically implemented, and that we will not see the same violence what we saw, for instance, in Sueda or in the coast with the Druze less than in the past. I think also there's a Syrian army, they have made changes. So we have to see now how this is implemented. But among the Kurdish population, there's still a lot of fear for human rights violations, and they don't really trust what is going on. But we have to see in those 4 days, because according to the last agreement, they were saying 4 days of basically coming to an agreement. So then we will see in these 4 days what will happen exactly, and if they will be managed to find some of concessions from both sides.
If you allow me just to answer your questions from Syrian perspective, which is...
Please do, because I was going to ask you, Ambassador Barabandi, who you think the blame lies with. Is there anything that Damascus should have done differently?
Look, it's irrelevant now. We are in different time zone now. I don't want to blame this or that. But today, all Syrian, they believe there should be one country, one flag, one capital, and one army. We will not allow, as a Syrian population, will not allow army within army or government or country within government. This is not accepted by any Syrian. This is full stop. We, as a Syrian, we differentiate between the Kurds and Kurds' right and Kurds being Syrian component of Syrian society. They have all the rights that all Syrians they should have. And we differentiate them from SDF/PKK. So there's two different aspects. During the last year of conversations or negotiation, the SDF tried to put themselves as we represent the Kurds. Syrian government and Syrian people believe the SDF is military group. It exists for certain target, countering ISIS, because United States cannot deal with Assad regime at that time, who's affiliated with Iran and Russian. So they find out that this is a group they can work with it. Today, things has changed. Syrian government is part of counter-ISIS coalition. They are the government, they are the legitimacy, and US is working with them. So they have to deal with SDF as military group, as rewarding them to be part of the new Syria as Syrian elements, not as foreigner elements. During that time, during this year, we found that SDF, they mishandled Syrian cause. They send wrong messages for Syrian population. They host pro-Assad fighters for Assad criminals. More than 7,000 people are in SDF control area. We saw them, they are supporting any other group that they want to separate it from Syria. So all these messages for the public again. They said this, how we are dealing with the group that, number one, claim that represent the Kurds and is hurting the Kurd cause. Number two, how we can handle with them when they are hurting Syrian people. After the revolution, we didn't see SDF supporting the Syrian revolution. SDF historically was with Assad against the Syrian by all the fights. Even though today the government, it says we are not in revenge status. We are building state. We want to build a state. We want a new page. We want Syria to be stable. We need equality for everyone. channels are open, doors are open. We need a goodwill from all sides. Since the government announced everything publicly and the Americans are witness, they are not bluffing. They're zero bluffing. They are sincere in what they are doing. We are watching the other side, the SDF. There's so much claims that there are some people who are extreme right, PKK, Kandil group, and there are some groups who are more moderate. They are more pragmatic, more Syrian, if we put it in this way. The 4 days is not for Syria to decide what to happen. The Syrian put the offer on the ground, on the table. It's announced, endorsed by United States, endorsed by other countries. It's up to PKK, SDF to decide which direction we are going. And this has nothing to do with the Kurdish population. No, just very clear. This has nothing to do with public. The Kurdish are Syrian. So they are Syrian like me, like any other Syrian. Nobody will touch them. The issue is with this military group. This is the whole issue. We don't want to mix between the Kurdish rights as Syrian and the military group who are there. De facto, they are there, and they should be absorbed by the Syrian institution.
Okay, all right, Omer, I can see you smiling there. So pick up on that. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be here clear to our listeners that they understand something. So far, all of the clashes between the former SDF, the YPG, and the Syrian army happened in Arab areas. There was literally no fighting in the Kurdish areas of northeastern Syria. In northeastern Syria, so far, the Syrian army only liberated areas. And all of this basically happened because the SDF at that time and the YPG insisted that they should continue controlling and governing Arab areas. So they were an occupying force and they wanted to maintain the occupation, and therefore we did not reach an agreement, even though Damascus made concessions that were rejected by Ankara, to be precise. Damascus agreed to the SDF integrating to the army as 3 divisions, which was a categorical no. And it was Damascus that convinced Turkey to not launch a military operation against the SDF a year ago. So coming back to where we stand now, look, when Ahmed al-Shara released the decree for Kurdish rights, there were celebrations among all the Kurdish areas currently controlled by the Syrian government. In Afrin, in Damascus, in Aleppo, Kurds celebrated. But the celebrations
and the Syrians celebrated, actually. And even the Arabs celebrated.
Yeah. Yes. And there were no celebrations in northeastern Syria by the Kurds who are controlled by the YPG. So why? This is the first question. The second question here is that we need to address the elephant in the room. The Kurds are, as of now, with this decree, a privileged minority in Syria. To be clear, now there is an unfairness against other minorities in Syria. For instance, the Syrian Turkmen, they speak Turkish, they are Syrian, and they lived in Syria longer than the Turks lived in Anatolia, in Turkey. And they don't have the same rights as the Syrian Kurds as of now, even though their numbers in terms of population is, according to some more, according to some less than the Kurds, but approximately the same. And they don't have the same rights, cultural, linguistic rights as the Syrian Kurds. So if this is about the rights of the Syrian Kurds, they are a privileged minority as of now, and the Syrian army has declared that they will not enter the Kurdish areas. They want these Kurdish areas to be integrated into the Syrian state peacefully, and they are willing to generate a police force for the Kurdish areas specifically, consisting out of locals. So this is a huge concession from Damascus, and the governance structure should be localized. And Ahmed al-Shara even proposed Mazloum Abdi that he can decide who should become the deputy defense minister of Syria, the governor of Hasakeh. And Hasakeh, the governorate of Hasakeh, is majority Arab. It's not majority Kurdish, but he offered the governorship position to be decided by the YPG. And he agreed that the new parliament, there is a third that was not appointed by Ahmed Shara yet, that the Mazloum Abdi can suggest names to be appointed as parliament members. So if this happens, and if indirect elections happen in northeastern Syria, the Kurdish parliamentary representation in the Syrian parliament will be more than the Kurds are in Syria. They will be overrepresented in the Syrian parliament. So from a Kurdish rights point of view, they have won big time. But the question is this about the Kurdish rights, yes or no? And everything that happened in the last year indicate that this is not about Kurdish rights, that this is about the PKK's aim of a one-party totalitarian regime to control everything. But unfortunately for them, they have lost all the oil fields and they have lost the ISIS card as the Syrian government has taken over the Al-Hol camp. And now the United States of America works with the Syrian government against ISIS.
Okay. We're going to come to ISIS and the United States in the final part of our debate. But what you've been saying there, Omar, actually leads me into this second segment, because I want to talk about the governance in the northeast and why we saw this collapse. I mean, the rapid collapse of the FDS caught many off guard. Backed by coalition training and support, it controlled about a third of Syria, including, as you mentioned there, key oil and gas reserves, and it boasted up to 100,000 fighters. Supporters of...
It was never 100,000.
As they say, they boasted that it was 100,000. Supporters say that there were gains in women's rights, inclusive governance, but underlying animosities remained. Arab-majority tribes, for example, who celebrated the group's collapse. So, Vladimir, I want to bring you back into the debate now that we've got your technical issues cleared. If everything was going so well in northeastern Syria under the SDF, if it was being governed prosperously, why did they fail so spectacularly?
I mean, it's because the US used to support the SDF, but they now support the new government in Damascus. And previously, before the fall of the Assad regime, a lot of the Arab tribes, they hated the Assad regime. And that's why, even though they didn't like the SDF, they would still prefer the SDF over the Assad regime. But now the situation has changed. You have a Sunni leader in Damascus, so they prefer to be under that leadership. And before the fall of the Assad regime, you didn't have that situation.
It's not
so the
about
complete situation
it's
has
about the occupation of the Arab land.
Also, Turkey supported.
We're just having a few audio issues with you there, Vladimir. I might just get you to repeat, to continue on your answer there.
The occupation lands in Turkey.
If you can still hear us, Vladimir, I just want you to keep going there. Give us a sense of why you think this collapse has happened, and do you think the people were genuinely celebrating? Is it equally divided? I mean, give us a sense of the true feeling on the ground.
I mean, the thing is that the SDF was pushed by the Americans into Deir ez-Zor and Raqqa. They wanted to actually connect Derik until Afrin, although there are also Arab and Turkmen areas in between those areas, so that's also quite difficult. So they wanted to create a continuous border area under their control, but it was not possible because Turkey opposed it and they launched 3 operations against them. So a non-state actor facing a state actor is very difficult. So it's not about governance or something like that. Because if you look to the governance of the autonomous administration, I mean, the SDF before was like 60% Arabic. If you now look to the police forces in Afrin, probably like not even 5% is Kurdish, and although the majority town is Kurdish. So they have failed in Afrin to make an inclusive police force. It's different for the Afrin Council. They have much more Kurds. So that's why the Kurds now hope that this new system will work better and that the Syrian government will recruit more Kurds in Kurdish-dominated areas, like, for instance, in Kobani and Afrin, in towns like Amuda and Derik, and that they will not impose like people from Idlib on their areas, because we saw just in Raqqa that they're always complaining about that was dominated by Kurds. They just appointed someone who's not from Raqqa. So we will have to see, because we see a lot of this actually moves that a lot of people that are actually from Idlib are appointed to key positions all over Syria. They are not native to some of these areas. They are not from those provinces. So we have to see if this governments will be inclusive. The Syrian government now is clearly in the upper hand. They have the alliance with the US. I mean, we always talk about the occupation of Arab areas. If we talk about that, we can also talk about the occupations of Kurdish majority areas in Iran and Turkey. In Iraq, they have a Kurdistan region of Iraq, so it's a bit different. So that's just a narrative. I mean, occupation. I mean, apparently it's okay if Kurds get dominated by a non-Kurdish majority, but the other way around, then it's the occupation. So I think that's a little bit a discourse that I disagree with, but it's up to you. And we'll see how these agreements will be implemented and if they'll be able to also remove heavy weapons from Kobani, and also to keep calling it Kobani and not trying to rename it Ain al-Arab again. And also if the government is serious in removing the injustices that were made in the 1962 census, when the previous past Syrian governments tried to Arabize the borderlands in Kurdish dominant areas on the border of Turkey. So because the Syrian government have said they are also rectifying, for instance, this thing of statelessness, because you have...
Oh, we seem to have again lost our connection there. So, but Bassem, I could see you having a little grin there.
I'm smiling because what he's saying, yani, in a kind of number one, they failed because the model that they created, that they exported professionally to the media as it's a new model that contain everybody. They have democratic process, the women rights, and so on and so forth. The reality on the ground is completely the opposite. They number one, most of this PKK, they are not even Syrian and they don't talk Syrians. Even if today in Raqqa, they get some Iranian guy who's from PKK, he was negotiating with the Americans for their forces to leave the Raqqa. He's Iranian, he cannot speak even Arabic. He get a translator with him. So this is kind of model. Number two, when they talk about women rights, it's you just Google it, normal Google. You can see the PKK is just kidnapping the girls, 15 and 14 years old, and they take them to their camp, military camp. They kidnap the girls, but in the media wise, again, they are very professional in the media wise. They say we have the women rights. I mean, women rights by kidnapping women. They didn't allow the Arabs to school to operate for 5 years. There's no Arabic school. There's no Christian school. Zero. So we have a new generation of Syrian under the occupation of PKK in our lands, in their lands, in their homes. They cannot go to the school. We have ignorant generation, unfortunately. They have all the wealth, and the areas has no electricity, no water, nothing, zero. So they couldn't create a model within all the US support, with all the wealth they have, to make the people feel belonging, to feel that this is the model that we are looking for the future. Plus, all this, if you are not PKK guy, even if you Kurds are not PKK, you are alienated from any services, from any committees you can have in your daily life. Mm-hmm. So when the government came in, it was the people were really happy. They take the lead. I mean, when you talk about the number of Syrian forces inside the Jazeera region, we don't call it except the SDF area. It is called Syrian Arab Jazeera region. The people themselves, they were kicking out SDF. It's not the Syrian army. They were taking the lead everywhere. So all this, to make it more easy, it's SDF is just like Afghani or Iraqi army. It just collapsed because it's highly corrupted. They don't belong to the people. They don't serve the people. They don't create a model that people like or feel they belonging. So they just lost the momentum when there's alternative. And the alternative was the Syrian legitimate government. Mm-hmm. We cannot say because, if the Syrian under SDF, all Arab and Kurds, they were happy with that model. American support it will be irrelevant. Relatively be irrelevant.
All right. We have Vladimir back now. So in the interest of fairness, I'm going to hand it back to Vladimir for the right of reply there. I know that you missed a large part of what Ambassador Barabandi was saying there. But in the interest of fairness, just respond to the final part of his comments that people welcomed the collapse of the SDF because it was highly corrupted, and it collapsed because a better model has now come into the fore. What do you say to that assertion?
Well, I'm not sure if it's a better model. We saw all the massacres in the coast and against the Alawites, and maybe now the last operations are much better than in the past, because I think there has been a lot of international support to basically improve their behavior. But I will not say that it's a better model. And also you have a lot of escapees of ISIS prisoners and females.
Yeah, but ISIS escaped because the SDF, they left the whole. They make official statements. Vladimir, it's not emotional. Let's be realistic. They make official statement as SDF, we are leaving the whole. That means they keep the doors open for the ISIS to leave. You cannot blame the government or the Arab public for that. You can just blame the SDF. They make official statements. So I'm not making this up. They say we are leaving. We don't care about them anymore.
And the Syrian government, they take an army to capture them back.
Okay, and let's just give Vladimir the right of reply then.
Yeah, but
I mean, they were attacked by groups, so this is why they withdrew. It's not that they just withdrew without any fight. They were like fighting, and their people got killed.
Without a fight.
That's a different debate. And also about there is no
realistic. I know we know each other since 10 years. When you're talking about the
let's just let Vladimir respond to that answer, Ambassador, only because his internet connection isn't strong, so we just need to make sure that he gets a fair response.
He wants millions of Arabs to be kicked out of their lands to create the Kurdish dream state.
Okay, Vladimir, respond to that. We'll give you the right of reply on that, and then we'll move on to our final segment.
Well, it's interesting that he now talks about Arabs and not Syrians. I mean, there's this thing that...
Because you are talking about the Kurdish state. I'm not saying, because you talk about you need Afrin to be connected.
I mean, you also you say that only the SDF want autonomy, but you know that's also not true. Like most of the Kurdish
you just say it. I'm not. You just say it.
Just let Vladimir finish his statement there, Ambassador.
I would just say, like they say it's just the SDF is the problem, but it's also, for instance, you have the Kurdish National Council. They want to have some form of decentralization, but there's the majority of the Sunni Arabs. They don't want that. I think if the situation was the other way around, it will be different. Because if you now look, for instance, to the Sunni Arabs in Iraq that are more a minority, they are more open for decentralization. So we'll see what the situation is. I think imposition by military forces are not a very good model. And hopefully they will find a solution to respect Kurdish rights and that at least they can have some form of local decentralization. Because in general, most of the Kurdish parties support that. And indeed, there were like celebrations on the government control. But that could also be for other reasons. I mean, they were enforcing themselves on these areas here because, for instance, you have in Iraqi Kurdistan that are not SDF. There were many protests against this in Slemani and Erbil and Duhok, in Kirkuk and other towns. So it's not just about the SDF and the PKK. There are many other Kurdish parties that have different views, that have similar
when the Kurdish,
demands for
I trust you.
So you cannot take it away, and we'll see how that will go.
The Syrian Kurds, they will get all their rights. Literally, the people of Kirkuk, they will demand their rights the way the Syrian Kurds, they get it. They get more rights, full rights, better than what the Kurdistan have rights. This is Syrian. We need to build a new page. We want to go to the future, that where Syrian are equal.
Let me push back on that, Ambassador, and just say that there's still a lot of warranted mistrust with the new administration, given some of the attacks that have been seen in other minority communities. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility for people to have distrust against...
I don't have sound
I just want to
and I'm not breaking down, but I also want to speak.
Speak, okay.
Go ahead, Omar.
Yeah, I mean, look, Melinda, first of all, in the first time in Syria's history, there was a court case, a trial to hold people accountable. And this is the new Syrian government. Yes, not everything is perfect. Or actually, nothing is perfect in Syria. It's a civil war that they have. But they are doing really good. Much better than any comparable analysis we have. There is no other post-war country that performed like the Syrian government is performing, to be frank and open. And it's going quite well, also thanks to the US policy. And here, I know Vladimir, and he really is good in representing the Kurdish street, how they think. And what he is saying is actually quite disappointing to me. Because what do they want more? I mean, let's be clear. They occupied Arab lands. The people, they liberated themselves before the Syrian army came in. I mean, most of the towns and villages, the SDA, the YPG lost, was not because of the Syrian army. It was the locals that kicked them out. And they engaged in ethnic violence. They engaged in war crimes. They killed prisoners. They released ISIS prisoners from the Shadadi camp as well as the El-Hol camp. And it was the Americans, as well together with the Syrian army, and also now confirmed by Trump personally, that captured these ISIS members back and put them into prison again. So this attitude is very frustrating for me. They are still in some Arab areas and still not willing to withdraw. And when it comes to governance, I mean, the Kurds are overrepresented in the parliament. These need to be discussed. It's not acceptable that a minority in a country dictates its term on the majority of the people. This was Syria in the last 55 years. The Assad regime was a minority that imposed its political vision on the majority of Syrians. And just like the people celebrated when Assad fell, the people celebrated when the SDF YPG fell.
Okay, all right. I've got an eye on the time, so I just want to make sure that I can hand this over to Vladimir for a response, because we've got another section of our debate still to come. So I'm sorry I have to interrupt you there. Omer, Vladimir, is it fair that a minority of people, as Omer said, can force the majority to live under in the style that they are choosing?
I mean, if you want to have an inclusive state, you have to include everyone. I mean, that's what democratic societies do. If you want to have another dictatorship, you're going to say, this is the Sunni majority, and you shut up and you do what you want. That's another option. That was also during the Assad regime.
But the Kurds are Sunni.
Like in other countries, like in the US or like in Germany, a federal state. I mean, we also saw what happened in Afrin. The demography got changed. A lot of Kurds were in prison. Their olive trees were burned. People were kidnapped for money. But that was
it's enough with these propaganda.
Factions, not the HTS.
If you are not willing to accept the reality,
were calling for the
this is quite frustrating. These propaganda attitudes of yours is really frustrating. Please, let's be clear.
It's not propaganda. We have a different opinion
on the edge of making a decision.
Have that in Turkey, but
the Kurdish areas either will be captured militarily if your attitude continues. This is one option that I don't want. The second option is the Kurds in Syria, and led by the YPG, unfortunately, northeastern Syria, the YPG comes to its sense and makes a good deal that preserves the right of the Syrian Kurds. I mean, don't you get it? If the March 10 agreement was implemented, the Syrian Kurds would even get much more rights, and they would have a much stronger position in Syria. The YPG, SDF would have been a major part of the Syrian army and the Syrian society, but they did not implement it. And now they are getting a deal, an implementation that was proposed before the March 10 agreement, and it's now their time to fulfill and implement it. If they don't implement it, the next deal may not be even there. This is the ultimate solution. So it's the best to stop this propaganda and be real.
Okay, I need to give Vladimir the right of reply. We've got to keep it balanced. A short response, and then I'm going to move us on.
I mean, it's what I'm saying. We just have different views. And I mean, I'm not imposing anything. The SDF, they make their own decision. We just have different views. I think there's a general sentiment among Syrian Kurds that they want to have some form of autonomy, and Damascus doesn't accept that. Fine, that's fine. That's up to them. And we will see what will happen if they can integrate it. But I don't agree with this idea that Kurds will have more rights than even the Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan, because the Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan, they have their own parliament, they have their own government, so it's very different. But of course, the demography and the situation in Syria is very much different from the one in Iraqi Kurdistan, so we also have to realize that. So hopefully they will find some accommodation, they will have free elections, they will not have an election like in the last time, that you just have 1/3 is chosen by the government, and the 2/3 are basically from the HTS or parties close to the HTS. There was not even any political party that participated in these elections. And the election in Iraq, although Iraq is very sectarian, Iraq was much more successful than Syria in elections, because you had different political parties joining. Although, of course, it all unraveled with sectarianism in the later time, but it's much more election-wise, it's more successful. I mean, in Turkey also, Turkey, you don't have a post-war situation, so that's maybe a wrong point. But I mean, in general, I don't think that Syria is such a great example. But we're going to see after this situation how it's going to be implemented, and if it will not be another Afrin where people were kidnapped and ransomed and people were raped in prisons. Thank you.
All right, we need to get on to our final section about US and international ramifications and implications here. So let me move us on before we run out of time. Henry Kissinger famously said, "It may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal." We've seen a very modern day example of this, perhaps, in a new social media post from the US Special Envoy, Tom Barak. He wrote that the reality on the ground has changed, and that the SDF no longer plays the role it once did for the US. Given cooperation between the US and the new Syrian administration, he's urged the SDF to work towards a unified Syria. Ambassador, let me bring you in here. Bassem, has the US neglected their duties in Syria? I mean, we're 1 year on, as Omar was saying, we've lost a whole year because we've signed a deal and just pretended that it was all the issues are done. Has the US neglected the finer details of ensuring a peaceful transition of power?
No, absolutely no. The U.S. position was very clear from day one, since President Trump met with President Shara. They say this is the legitimate government. This is the partner of the United States. They will be part of countering ISIS. So they announced all the policy publicly. I mean, it's up to at that time, it was SDF. They didn't believe it, that the life is changing, political dynamics has changed, and they still counted on the old history. But the American position was very clear a year ago. And they were, Barak and other CENTCOM guys, they always tell the Kurds that this has been changing. You should change with the change. You cannot just keep your way away as if there's nothing has changed. So to blame the American that they just sacrificed the Kurds is not right or correct statement. I think the Kurds, they overreact, or they overestimated or overtrust themselves that American cannot leave us. I mean, but the American were telling them, we are leaving you. From the April 10 agreement, it was very clear the American is shifting towards Syrian government. They have legitimate partners is Syrian. So I think that was miscalculation by the Kurds. It's not by Syrian government or the American government. Everything was very clear. And I just want to back quickly to what Vladimir was saying. Look, most of the Kurds are Sunni. So he cannot say the Kurds are not Sunni and Syrian are Sunni. The Kurds, 90%, he knows better than me, are conservative Sunni, not even Sunni, conservative Sunni. So we cannot say, I mean, we can be very clear to say Arab Kurds or Sunni versus non-Sunni. Then the government, the Syrian government, regardless how Vladimir look into it, it's literally sincere to have equal opportunity, equal rights for all Syrian. It's ideal. It's not ideal yet. The government is still establishing. It's less than 1 year since its takeover. The problems in Syria is unbelievable. More than 90% of people under the poverty lines, 60% of infrastructure is being destroyed. So it's not an ideal. We don't have revenue. We don't have the money. We don't have anything. So we are not ideal. And we know not ideal, but we know their sincerity. We know that even as Vladimir said that there's so many people from pro-Assad, from pro-Shara people are in key positions, but that is temporary. This is not the case. This will not be the case. When he will talk about Afrin things, I just want to remind him that there's more than 200,000 of people from Deir Zor and Raqqa are not allowed to back to their home before because of SDF regulation. Now they come back. He's talking about 5,000 of Afrin, are talking about 200,000. Again, in Syria, people are looking for tomorrow. We are not talking about the past.
Okay.
We talk about institution, we are about regulation, we talk about rebuilding Syria for all Syrian. We don't want to talk much about the past.
Okay. Vladimir, do you think the US has neglected their SDF allies in Syria?
Well, I mean, from the Kurdish perspective, they have seen that the US, they abandoned the Kurds during the referendum. When the Kurds had the independence referendum and all the neighboring countries attacked them and they did nothing. And now they see the same happening with the Turkish operations in the last year and now here. So they had sacrificed all these people in the fight against ISIS to keep those ISIS prisoners in Al-Hol camp. And now the US is working with an Islamist regime that is led by a person that used to be on the terrorist list. And actually some of his advisors were friends of bin Laden, who was responsible for 9/11. So they have now changed itself. They are now maybe moderate. They are not like the same, the jihadists of the past. I mean, the HTS have changed a lot. They have improved. They have seen governments in Idlib, and they are now doing it also in Damascus. So they are not like in the past, strictly jihadist movement. But we saw also in the last time that the member of the Syrian security forces shot US soldiers. Also, we saw recently there were some incidents of beheadings of SDF fighters. There was also 2 women were captured by one of the Syrian soldiers and promising his leader to offer them as a reward.
It never stops.
So we have to see if the Syrian government can stop this kind of abuses.
The fake news propaganda
we saw also in Sweden that people were killed and they were called atheists. And we also saw that the current government soldiers, they're calling people pigs and atheists, and they're calling them with slurs. So maybe they have to improve that instead of calling people atheists and dogs and this kind of stuff, because if this is inclusive governance to call people dogs and atheists, I mean, that's not the kind of democratic governance we like to see, for instance, in the US or in Europe, where, for instance, Bassam Barandi is living in the US. Although this US government, they have changes, but we will see. I hope that for the US government, they will draw their troops from Syria, because if they will not withdraw, they will maybe be much more this kind of incidents, what you also saw in Afghanistan.
Okay, all right. We've lost our connection with the ambassador, but Omer, let me come to you for a response, and then we'll wrap up there. Respond to some of what Vladimir has been saying, and also your assessment on the role the US has played. Is it abandonment? Is it just moving with the new geopolitical times? And did Turkey have any hand in convincing the US perhaps to lean more towards the new administration rather than the SDF?
I mean, first of all, about what Vladimir said, there's a good thing about the Soviet Union that was said. They know they lie. They know that we know they lie. They know that we know that they know that we lie. And they still continue to lie. The propaganda of the SDF and its propaganda tools never stop, unfortunately. And the fake news, the recent rhetoric by Vladimir, just like there were women's rights and the people were enjoying the YPG in northeastern Syria, we have seen that this was not true. They collapsed. So this propaganda, unfortunately, is so problematic that they themselves believed in this propaganda, and we are now where we are. If they were a bit more realistic, we wouldn't come here. And about the international perspective, the United States of America in Syria has a clear agenda to work with Turkey, to work with Saudi Arabia, to embrace the new Syrian government and to allow it to succeed, even against the Israeli interests. And the United States of America is working closely with Turkey in Syria. This is a fact, this is a reality. Trump has said this on multiple occasions. And the American government has even brought the Israelis to the negotiation table with the Syrian government. And the American side is continuously supporting the Syrian government. And here, when it comes to the SDF issue, since 2014, the Americans always, in every statement they made, they said, this is a tactical, transitional, and temporary alignment. Okay. So they said that this will happen. But it was unfortunately YPG that believed its own propaganda and are now feeling that something that like they are betrayed. No, it was not a betrayal. It was what the Americans said from day one. They said this is tactical, temporary, and transactional. But unfortunately, YP thought that the US is going to give them a state in the Middle East. Okay.
All right. We're out of time, so I'm just going to leave it there. We've got you back very briefly, Vladimir. I know you're coming to us from northeastern Syria, where internet and power are a little problematic, so we appreciate your perseverance and your appearance here. Let's just get one final word from you, because we didn't get a chance to put it to you earlier. Is there a sense that the US has betrayed the SDF and their alliance in Syria?
Well, according to the SDF point of view, they did, although the US didn't promise them anything like autonomy. But they sort of had this belief, maybe a wrong belief, that they sacrificed so many people in the fight against ISIS and they prevented a lot of ISIS attacks on Europe, that at least they will get some reward, at least some form of recognition, and not attacks by different groups. So we have to see how this kind of new governments will be implemented, and if it will not be another Afrin where there was demographic changes. And if, for instance, the ambassador saying, okay, Deir ez-Zor is occupied by Arabs, then you could also later in the future can say, okay, Kobani is occupied by Arabs or Afrin is occupied by Arabs. So we have to make a sort of a middle ground, and hopefully Damascus can find a way to recruit Kurds in the local police and have some local governments in cooperation with the SDF and the new political
There will
system.
be if the PKK doesn't mess it up.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. It has been a debate of technical issues, but we appreciate your perseverance. We've lost Ambassador Bassam Barabandi. He is no longer with us, but the former Syrian ambassador and consultant coming to us there. We appreciate his contribution. Omer Özkizilcik, Senior Non-Resident Fellow at the Atlantic Council, and Vladimir Van Wilgenberg, journalist, writer and author. Thank you all for your diverse opinions and your contribution here to Counterpoints. And thank you for tuning in to this episode. What an interesting one it was. We appreciate your viewership. Keep up to date with our debates by subscribing to Al Arabiya English on YouTube and follow us across X and TikTok.